Hey everybody, Andrew Hogue here, your security, privacy, and forensics expert. Today, I'm going to have a new article in my series about software build materials, and in this one, I want to focus on how to automatically build your software build material using GitHub Actions. This is really important so that you can focus on developing your mobile app and then leverage the power of automation and DevSecOps to automate the different steps to examine your app for security issues, privacy issues, app store blockers, and things of that sort. So let's dive right in. Everything I talk about today is available on my personal website, Don't Panic. Just go to andrewhogue.com, click on blog, and you'll see a list of all the blogs there. As you may know from previous segments, I am the co-founder of NowSecure, and so part of what I'll focus on today is leveraging NowSecure platform to do binary analysis against a mobile app to generate a software build material. You can go ahead and register for our 10 free SBOM offer. That way you can follow along directly with me in this tutorial. I've also put links in the blog to previous articles that will help you make sure your environment is properly set up and you have all the tools you need to download and build the mobile apps. So the first thing that we're going to do is fork the K9 repo. That way, all the changes that you make are isolated to your personal account and don't have any impact on the actual application itself. So to do that, and I went ahead and put a link in the blog, you're just going to go out to the K9 mail app repo, click fork, and then you'll be able to create a new fork in your personal account. Now I went ahead and already did that on my account, and so you can see I've got ahogue42 K-9. Whenever you type in your own commands, make sure you change the ahogue42 to your username. Now, one of the first things that we need to do is enable dependency graph in GitHub. The dependency graph allows you to automatically see all of the dependencies that are in your repo, and you can use both source code analysis, which is built into GitHub, and then binary analysis tools like NowSecure Platform, which allow us to then upload our results into the dependency graph. So you just go under Insights, Dependency Graph, and then you'll see in the blog I have a screenshot. If you haven't enabled them yet, there'll be a big green button that says Enable Dependency Graph. As you can tell, I've already done that, and so you can see that Dependabot and GitHub has already detected different dependencies in some of the workflow files that are included in this repo. Okay, so let's go ahead and clone the repo to our local workstation. So as you've seen in other demos, we'll just go ahead and create a folder in our home directory called SPF Expert and then change into that directory. And then you're going to go ahead and clone the repo into that folder. Now again, ahogue42 is my personal account, so make sure you pop your name in there instead. And I went ahead and already cloned the repo just to speed things up here. So you can see it's in there. It'll just take you a second, and then go into the K9 directory and you'll see all the source files sitting there locally on your computer. Now the next step is optional, but I always find it really useful to build the app locally just to make sure I understand what's going on. I have everything up and running locally, and then I can go replicate that process on GitHub with GitHub Actions, so it's automated from there on out. In order to do that, there's a number of dependencies that you have to have already installed. The application itself targets Java 8, but they mention in their wiki article on how to build K9 Mail that if you're building command line, go ahead and use Java 11. The good news is I set up Java 11 in a previous tutorial, which I've linked to here, so you can just go in there and see how to install it if it's not set up on your Mac already. Similarly, you need to make sure that you have Android Studio and SDK platform, and again, I've linked out to the previous article where you can have all of that up and running if you just follow that tutorial. So one of the last steps you need to do is you need to make sure that you export your Android SDK information so that when you kick off the build process, it knows exactly where the SDK is. In order to do that, you just export a number of environment variables, so now it's accessible in the terminal. And with that, we're just going to go ahead and leverage Gradle like we've done in the past for other Android apps. So it's just Gradle W, assemble debug, and then hit enter. The reason I'm assembling the debug version is it's a lot easier to configure and set up. We don't have to worry about signing keys and things of that sort. Now, this was obviously super quick. I'd already built the application earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and just show it to you here. So it's going to be under the app K9 Mail build outputs APK debug folder. And you can see now we've got a 13 meg APK. and then some output metadata JSON there. So everything's up and running locally. Now we're ready to just go ahead and move on and configure the NowSecure mobile SBOM action so we can do everything automated in our GitHub workflow. Now there's a couple of steps you have to follow in order to get various tokens and group IDs from NowSecure platform. I went ahead and put the basic instructions out there, and I also linked to our help center. So once you have an account, you can log into the help center and you'll get a nice little step-by-step with screenshots. I went ahead and skipped that part so that we can really focus on the GitHub portion of this. Once you do have your NowSecure token, we have to configure secrets in our repo. So in order to do that, you're just going to pop into your repo, go under the secrets tab, and then create a new secret for NowSecure token. So that's pretty straightforward. I have it in the blog, you can see it in the screenshots, but you just go under settings, secrets, actions, and then you can see I've already configured one called ns_token. You could call it whatever you want. This is just how I reference it in the GitHub action. And if you need to create new ones, you just click on this new repository secret and you're off to the races. The last piece of information we'll need from NowSecure is the group ID where apps are stored. In order to access this, you can again look at the help desk article that I've linked, but you'll just log into NowSecure platform, click on apps, select one of the apps that you'd like to target, and then you can click on the details there. There'll be a little button there to just copy the UUID for the group. Now go ahead and keep that either on your clipboard or store it somewhere temporarily because we're going to use that here in just a minute. One of the last steps we need to do is configure a GitHub Action workflow. And this is really pretty straightforward. GitHub uses something called YAML files, or yet another markup language. And you go ahead and just create them in a specific folder, the .github/workflow folder in your repo. Now you can use starter actions and do all of this through the GitHub UI. My preference is just to do this command line. It also makes it a lot easier to put out in a blog and just show this to you live. So let's go ahead and create that file manually, and then we'll copy the configuration information into there, and then we'll go ahead and check it into the GitHub repo, and then we should be ready to go. You can really call the workflow file anything that you want, just to keep things kind of clean and simple. I'm gonna call this the NowSecure-SBOM YAML. And the key parts of the workflow syntax, and I've linked out here to the full set of directions, is just the name of what you're gonna call the action, when you wanna kick it off. And in this particular instance, I'll just do a workflow dispatch, which means you just kick it off manually, makes it really simple for testing. And then there'll be various jobs inside that workflow. Those could be, for example, building an app, uploading it to NowSecure, waiting for the results to come back, or uploading the SBOM data to the dependency graph. So in order to follow along here, we're gonna go ahead and just open up the GitHub workflows NowSecure SBOM YAML file. You can use whatever editor you prefer. And then below you can see the syntax that you'll copy into that. So if you take a look at this, I've already set this up. Again, I put a name of NowSecure SBOM. There's the workflow dispatch that I mentioned. So that's just gonna allow you to manually kick things off. And we're targeting the main branch here. There's a lot of other ways you can leverage automated features here. For example, to kick an action off every time there's a new push to a branch, or there's a pull request, or you can even cron things up nightly. And then we're gonna go ahead and run this particular job. Now, this job is going to be the build job. It's gonna run on the latest version of an Ubuntu runner. And then we're gonna go ahead and use some of the built-in actions that GitHub gives us to do things like check out the repository. Then we're gonna go ahead and install Java. And again, these are just already pre-set up, very easy to use. They take different variables. So we're gonna say, hey, I want Java 11. Go ahead and cache the Gradle distribution to speed things up in the future if you rebuild it. And then there's a really important step here I want to point out. It's called validate Gradle wrapper. One of the things that happens when you have open source projects is people may issue a pull request and say, hey, there's a new version of Gradle out. Go ahead and accept this pull request, and that will include the latest version of Gradle into the repo. The problem is that Gradle's checked in as a jar file, so it's binary file. And an attacker could actually go in there and modify that particular jar file to do something malicious. So for example, they could say, hey, after I'm building the app, but just before it's fully compiled, sneak in some of my malicious code that will exfil somebody's data or steal crypto keys or passwords or emails. And so GitHub actually created this really cool little action that will validate any version of Gradle that's built into the repo. And that way you can go out there and say, look, there's a version of Gradle in there. The jar file is gonna get a hash against it. And then they'll compare that against the known hashes of official builds to make sure that somebody hasn't kind of Trojan horsed your version of Gradle. So we'll go ahead and pop that in there real quick just to validate it. And then we're really just gonna follow along with what you kind of saw in the command line. We're just gonna run Gradle assemble debug. Stack trace will give you a little bit of extra info if something fails. And then you can turn off the daemon, because the way the GitHub Actions work is they're gonna be running interactively. And so we don't really need the daemon of Gradle to be running behind the scenes. So really this is just an efficiency thing, that if you have Gradle running on your workstation, you don't necessarily want to start it up every single time you're doing a build. So it'll run in the background. We don't need that for a GitHub Action kind of automated build. So you just disable that with that disable flag. And then lastly, after the application is successfully built, we want to go ahead and store that application as an artifact in the repo. We're going to just call it app. And then you reference out where that particular APK is built. And when we manually built it, it was helpful to be able to find it locally. So now you know exactly where it's located. You store that in the repo, and then we can reference that in the next step. So the second job that we're going to kick off is called scan. Again, you could call these things whatever you want, but for simplicity, I went ahead and chose scan. We're going to run that on, again, an Ubuntu latest runner. It needs the build command, so that means it's going to be dependent upon the previous step, and it'll wait till that completes. And then we're going to go ahead and check out the repository and then download that app artifact so that we now have it referenced and available to us directly. And then we're going to call the NowSecure SBOM action. So you can see us referencing the V1 action that we have out there. We're going to go ahead and put in a 60-minute timeout. And then we're going to configure a couple of variables here. The NS token secret that we referenced earlier. And then we're going to pass along the app file, which is that K9 mail debug APK. And then lastly, I went ahead and copied in the group ID for the particular group where I want this result to end up. So after you've done all of those steps, you're going to go ahead and just add that particular file to your repo. So you could just say git add, and then you're going to put the file name out there. I've already done that. And then you're going to go out and actually commit the changes that you just made with some sort of commit message. So here I'm just saying, look, commit this particular file. I'm putting in a comment, and I just said I'm adding the NowSecure mobile SBOM action. So once you commit that, then you're able to just go ahead and do a git push, and then that will upload any of your changes to the repo. Now, again, I had already done this earlier, so there's nothing to upload. But once you do that, it now becomes available on the GitHub UI. So once everything has been uploaded, you can just click on the GitHub UI for your particular repo, go to Actions, and you'll see a list of any of the workflows you have configured here. I'm going to go ahead and click on NowSecure SBOM. You can actually view the workflow file that we just created. So that's kind of a nice little UI hack there. It's sitting there for you. And then you can see that I previously ran this just to make sure everything was up and running and working. As I mentioned with the workflow dispatch, you can go ahead and click Run Workflow, and that's going to kick off a new workflow immediately. Again, that's really great for testing, or if you just need to occasionally run jobs and you don't want to run them every single time you make a check-in. And then you can see here that 10 seconds ago, I kicked off a manual job. When you click through on the details there, you're actually going to see the build process and then the scan process. Again, there's a dependency between the two, so scan won't complete until build does. And I'm going to go ahead and go back and show you what the successful one looked like. So it took 29 minutes, took about 6 minutes to build, and then it took us 22 minutes to do a full scan of the binary on the NowSecure platform. Now, we do both static binary analysis as well as dynamic analysis. So it actually ran the app 4 times dynamically through different hostile network environments, intercepting TLS and things of that sort. So we got 4 complete scans of the app plus a binary analysis, took about 30 minutes. And then once those results were complete, the action downloaded them and made them available in the GitHub UI. So we'll take a look at that now. You can also see any sort of warnings and things of that sort here. Here you can see the app artifact that was uploaded. And if you click through on any of these details, you can actually see the specific steps inside that particular job and get all the details. So now that the workflow completed, I'm going to go ahead and click on Insights, go into the dependency graph. And as I mentioned earlier, GitHub is going to go ahead and scan some of the source files. So you can see the different workflow files that were included in the repo have some different dependencies. Our SBOM, for example, uses the checkout action, the download artifact, the wrapper validation. So you can see those different dependencies there. And then for the binary analysis, we actually group each of our findings based on the particular dex file that we found it in. So here you could see, for example, in one of the multi-dex files, we've got different Kotlin libraries. We have the OKIO library from Square that makes input-output fairly straightforward. Some various dependencies from Apache Commons. And you can go through and actually see all the different values in here. As I showed in some of my other demos, you can actually download this in a CycloneDX format from the NowSecure REST API, or you could use different tools to pull information off of the dependency graph, or simply just use the information as is inside GitHub. So I hope you found this useful. I have a number of other pragmatic tutorials I'm going to be releasing soon, so stay tuned for more content. Until next time.